Hi, everybody. My name's Robin Currie, and I have been just delighted in my life to have been both an author and a librarian. So I'd like to merge those two worlds with you today for a little bit. Know how you could get your books into the library. Could we have the slides, please? That'll help. So here's the library market for authors. If you've walked into the library before, you probably have offered your book to the person at the front desk, and they've said something like, I don't know, or yeah, I guess I could give it to somebody. And it hasn't been very rewarding. There's other ways to get around. But first, let's understand how it's done. I have a Master's of Library Science degree from the University of Iowa in Iowa City, and I spent 30 years on the public desk, sometimes in children's, sometimes in rural communities, sometimes in grown-up communities in the big city. I've also written 7 resource books for librarians and over 40 picture books. So I've had multiple opportunities to try to get my books into the library. And I've also had multiple opportunities to figure out how to choose books for the library. Those are the two sides I'd like to share with you. First of all, of course, a library is not all books. Any library, no matter whether it's in the school or the public world, will have ebooks and magazines and movies, sometimes puppets or audiobooks, music, programs, reference services, all kinds of things. But for simplicity at this point, rather than go through that whole list every time I refer to it, I'll just talk about books. And my background is from the public library aspect. So I'll talk about that first and then into the more specialized libraries you might want to consider for your book. Libraries, of course, go back to the beginning of recorded time, and records is what they were at first, just records and facts, keeping track of the laws and the things that were important for everyone to know and everyone to keep track of. There was no such thing as a lending library or much literacy for people, even if they could read, to be able to read. So originally on stone and then papyrus, but even after Gutenberg invented the printing press in the 1500s, books were rare. They were only owned by the very rich or the church, as was the ability to read only among the very rich and the church. As you can see from the picture, those books were so precious that they were often chained to the library wall, and you could only use them if you were certified and had very clean hands. So libraries were controlled by a very small group of people and used only for research. And the books within the library were just arranged however the person who controlled it wanted to arrange them. When the library world moved over to the United States, like many things in the United States, it became more egalitarian. And so the concept of a tax supported institution that would serve the taxpayers is a very uniquely American system. You will find it in other countries now. You will find some academic libraries that are open to the public. You will find more availability. But the idea of paying tax money into a system that then provides books or materials for the public is very unique. But we needed to have a little bit of organization before we could do that. Melville Dewey, if you're familiar with the Dewey Decimal System, was the one that organized all of that nonfiction for us. As I said before, books were organized in the other libraries pretty much the way the person who collected them wanted them to be organized. So if he put all his favorite books in front, that was just fine. But Melville Dewey came up with a system using the subject matter. So he assigned each different subject area a different number, and then within that, subgroups. This meant that if you went from one library to another library, the book would be located in exactly the same place. You could locate things, and the information would be movable from place to place. But the next thing we needed was a place to have these libraries. Andrew Carnegie was an inventor and an entrepreneur. He made a great deal of money, but in his later years, he became a philanthropist. And one thing he truly believed in was the importance of libraries and public education and literacy. And so he donated enough money to build over 2,500 libraries across the country, many of them in small communities where there would not have been any opportunity to have a library or literacy. These two gentlemen did a great deal to move the concept of the public library and the amount of literacy that people had into the mainstream to where we as Americans believe this is simply our right is to have one. Now you can see here the library market as far as authors are concerned is a good one. You may sell 10,000 copies of your book on Amazon, but it would be surprising. It would be a bestseller in that case. But if you manage to get into all the public libraries all over the country, you'd have 9,000 sales right there. And in fact, if you look down a little further to the school libraries, you'll see there's almost 100,000 various school libraries in public, in private, all kinds of different school libraries. Then there's also special libraries focusing on one particular subject matter. There's ones in the armed forces, and there's government libraries. The Library of Congress, of course, holds every book that has ever been published, but most of the rest of the libraries need to have a limitation on their spending. So you won't get into all 116,000 libraries, but we can find a way to help get some of your books into a few more places because it is a lucrative market. This is a public library. In fact, that's a very typical Carnegie Public Library in a small rural community. In a public library, you'll find fiction and nonfiction and children's books. The main reason to put a book in a public library is because it will be of interest to the local community. That means that every collection in a public library looks slightly different. There will be some things that will all be in there. Chances are everyone will buy the latest John Grisham book when it comes out. But there will also be very specialized things, perhaps a Polish language section or a Spanish section or one that has a lot of Hindu cooking. Each library will develop along its own interests. But if you're looking for the widest spread places to get your book in, whatever the topic is, the public library is the first place to go. There are also public school media centers, and they develop around the curriculum of the program. So in the preschools, they only want books that are going to be appropriate for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. In the grade schools, they will want a K-6 only based on the curriculum. In middle school, that's usually grades 7, 8, or 6 to 9, whatever you call junior high students. And they will have a set curriculum with the very narrow range of history, for example, that they're studying in the years they're there. But they do study the same years of history every single year. So if you find out that your middle school teaches Civil War every single year, you can get into that curriculum very easily. The high school, of course, will be even more curriculum based and will often have academic colleges that lead to even college credit while people are in high school. But the key for the public school media center is it's always curriculum based. There are some things that will not be in the curriculum at all. Some of my friends who are writing in the Christian market often find it very frustrating to go talk to the public schools. The public schools are very careful never to proselytize or put anything in the library that does not support the curriculum. Therefore, if they are not teaching Christianity, for example, they will not put any books in the library that relate to that. So just be aware that you have to look at the curriculum first before you get a librarian in a school library or media center interested in your book. In university libraries, there may be 4 or 5 or 6 libraries on the whole campus. They will all be narrowly focused and they'll be totally research-based. So there may be a law library, a science library, an engineering library, a library science library. Very seldom will you find a university library that has a vast fiction collection unless it's in the arts section. But if you have a book that is very specialized or academic in nature, the university library system is a good one to get into. And then there are religious libraries. Many churches have a small little room tucked away where they house some books, some videos, some reading material that the public library does not have because it's too specialized for that community. They tend to be denomination based or religion based. So you might have a library at a mosque that had only books that support the Muslim way of life. In more general libraries, there could be a fiction and a nonfiction and a children's section, but they'll all be within the parameters of the denomination and the beliefs of the people who are coming to that library, usually as part of their church experience. Religious libraries have very limited finances. They're also trying to buy paper towels for the bathroom and keep the clergy fed. So they don't have a lot of money, but if it is something that fits into the denomination that you're writing for, by all means, approach the religious library. And then there are specialized libraries, museums, zoos, arboretums, botanic gardens. Each one will have a library. Some of them are only available to the staff members, the people who work there, but some of them are open to the public for them to go in and look at the books. Hospitals and social agencies often have a vast medical library, but many times they'll need materials to share with their patients to instruct them or show them how things are done or what their possibilities are. Theaters and music venues often have a library connected to them, most times just on the subject matter involved in their particular venue, but many times with a children's area where children can come and learn about the things that happen in the theater or the music venue. So there will be a very limited collection focus. For example, at our local arboretum, and that's what this picture is, mostly it's going to be books about plants. However, I know that they have a biography section of people who have been interested and important in the arboretum development, and they also have a children's area where children can read about plants and people who developed plants. So if your book has a very special interest to it, or a piece of it could be considered a special interest, don't overlook the special interest libraries. I'd like to take you with me now into the staff room where there's plenty of coffee brewing, but there's also the mystery of how we choose a book for the library. First of all, keep calm. We do not care about how many 5-star reviews you have on Amazon. We never watch IG Reels. We don't care about your TikTok followers or your blogs or your tweets. You can make as many YouTube videos as you want, and the librarians will never look. And we don't care how many Facebook likes you have. We just don't care. Librarians don't have time to pursue all that and research it and find out what it is about you. So all of those things that you probably did to make yourself available to the publishing world to get their attention and to be sold in the general marketplace really don't matter in the library world. Here is the only thing that matters. Can I, as a librarian, justify spending tax dollars on this book for this community? Tax dollars and this community. Now, whether that's I'm spending school funds for this particular building of my district, or whether I'm spending the public tax dollars on a section of the public library, I have to always be thinking, I'm not buying it with my money. How can I spend this book in the best way for the people that have entrusted me to have it available for them? So here is a selection policy for the Glen Ellen Public Library, which is where I live. You can see that we need, first of all, to have interest to members. Our members in Glen Ellen are very different than they would be in rural Iowa or in western Wyoming. We live in a particular place and location, and so it has to be interest to our members. We also consider the popularity of the author. We will probably buy the next John Grisham book, no matter what, because as an author, he is so popular, people are going to be asking for it. We look very closely at the authenticity of the information. We want to make sure that if we put a nonfiction book on the shelf, we can defend what's in there as being an authentic representation of facts. It gets a little trickier when you have some opinions about books, but we need to make sure the facts are true and straightforward. So we trust a lot on the authority of the author or the publisher. There are certain authors we can trust to tell the right story in the right way. There are certain publishers that over the years have come to have the kind of reputation that we trust. So those are the 4 ways that we look at an item we're going to put in the library. We do not exclude any topic just because of the moral, racial, religious, or political attitudes in the book or in the librarians. So how do we know, if we're not experts in every single field, which books to pick? We look at the critical consensus among recognized subject authorities. In other words, we read reviews. We know that the reviewer has become an authority in the area, or they will search for someone who is an authority and can justify the purchase of that book with factual information, since we can't read them all, nor in the library can we afford them all. If you read on a little further in that selection statement, and this is based on the American Libraries Association collection development policy. So this will be pretty universal, and then subsets of this will be in the school libraries and the special libraries. They'll all adhere to these things. We're going to look for reviews first. Our reviews are going to come from Library Journal, Book List, and Publishers Weekly. Those are 3 big, well-known reviewing journals that we have come to trust over the years as having the best interests of the public at heart. We also look at publishers' catalogs. About 3 times a year, publishers' catalogs come in, and they're beautiful, and they show all kinds of wonderful new books, and we'd love to buy them all. And we can choose to buy some of them if the publishers have good reputations and we've purchased from them before. We do take suggestions from members of the community, and this is true not only in the public library, but in the schools and academic libraries. They will want to have your input as well as from their study. In most cases, if you take a book that is self-published into the library, the first thing you will hear from the librarian is, "We can't buy it because it doesn't have any reviews." We have no way of knowing, unless we know you personally, whether this book has the right information that we want to be handing out. And we don't have time to read them all and make a value judgment. So that may be one of your first stumbling blocks that you come into with self-published or with published by smaller publishers, that they can't get a review. I'll show you a way to work around that. Now, if you notice, the Glen Ellen Library has an area called the Emerging Author Collection. That is another way to get your book into your particular local library. Usually it won't be a sale, it'll be a donation, and it will go into a special section for emerging authors. No matter what book it is, it will sit in the Emerging Authors Collection and may never be heard from again. So that's not the route you want to go if you want your book out and circulating so other people will request it and ask for it, especially when you get your next book ready. So here are the places that we go to pick books. These are the places that have been vetted over time, and we trust to have the best interest of the library community at heart. Kirkus is the big one That's a huge name. Um, Kirkus has been established as a reviewer for library resources ever since I've been in the library world and before. The next two on the list are actually put out by the library associations, the American Library Association book list and the Library Journal. Those are particularly vetted for those of us in a library setting. Publishers Weekly has all kinds of different lists of books, all of which have been reviewed and vetted, but it's also for the bookseller as well as for the library. So you can see on the cover of the Library Journal, it's what boomers want. They're speaking specifically to if your library has a fair number of boomers, what is it they want to find on the shelves? Or what do they not want to see? Whereas the Publishers Weekly cover says bestsellers for everyone. Anyone that comes into the library or to the bookstore is going to look for something that was listed in Publishers Weekly. In addition, there are specific reviews. School Library Journal is for K to 12, so they'll be curriculum based. They'll follow the curriculum and support what's happening in the education world. Book Link is for K through 8, and that will also include fiction books as well as nonfiction. Hornbook Magazine is a children's reviewer that has been around for a long time and takes only the very best of the books that are out there. Then for the public, the New York Times bestseller list. If something comes up on that bestseller list and we don't have it in the library yet, we are behind. We want to be able to catch those books and anticipate that they're going to be bestsellers before they ever get out there. Then their library journal has special focus editions and articles once in a while. So there might be a science and technology month where that's all they do is review what's new in science and technology. Once a year, they review all the books they feel are worthy that have been self-published. Or once in a while, they'll have a romance edition. They'll go through the year with a library journal goes through the year and picks a different subset of the library to buy special books for. So those are the ways that we get to look at reviews. I also said publishers' catalogs. So 4 times a year, these catalogs will come out. As you can see, they're beautiful. They have all kinds of good stuff. They come out 4 to 6 months before the book is released. So I, in the library in February, March, April, am picking books that will be on my shelves next September, October, November. My brain is in Halloween and we haven't gotten to the first day of spring yet. It takes that long to select the book, to order it, to get it in, to process it, to put on the shiny plastic cover, put on the label, and get it on the shelf. So librarians are always thinking at least 2 seasons and sometimes more ahead if we know a new book is coming. We especially use publishers' catalogs for special groups like children's books. We'll find the picture book collection, the children's section, much more useful in there. Sometimes a series of books will come out, and we want to make sure to get the next one in Diane Gabaldon's series of Scotch books and make sure that it's there. Even if it hasn't gotten a review, we want to be sure to have it because people will look for it. And sometimes there are things of local interest that we don't want to miss that might have fallen through the cracks. So we love publishers' catalogs as well. And then there are requests. Once again, this is from the Glen Ellen Public Library, and it's the request form that you could fill out, anybody can fill out, and hand in to be added to the Collection Development Committee. So they're going to lay it down next to the information that we had on collection development. They're going to put your request side by side and find out if the two have some touch points. So you'll want as much as you can about your information, the type of material, the title, all kinds of things. But the important thing, if you want to get your book into the library, is right down at the bottom, the additional information. That's where you can get your request in that'll make it stick and make the librarian go to the effort to get it. We'll talk about that in a minute. We are also very concerned with community interest. Remember, it's tax dollars paying for community interest. This is the demographic of Glen Ellen. So when I was in the library over there, this is who we bought for. You can see the demographic, the breakdown of race. You can see the breakdown of education. You can see that we're a typical western suburb of Glen Ellen, right outside Chicago. We have a high literacy rate. We also, though, have a significant number of people who are who have moved into the community or use the community from a slightly different area. We need to be aware of those people who use the library regularly, those that we could encourage to use the library regularly. So in some libraries, you won't find a Hispanic Latino population, but you will find a very large Polish population. Chicago has a lot of people from Poland here. In that case, you would want to adjust your community interest stats to match what you had locally. So keep that in mind if you've written a book out of your own experience that probably has a community interest, if not in your community, then perhaps one nearby. We also have groups that meet. We have the Glen Ellen Runners. I would guess the Glen Ellen Public Library has 4 or 5 runners magazines of various kinds. Not every library will have that. We also have a very active philatelic club, a group of people that collect stamps. Over the years, they have assembled a big collection of collecting books. You go to another library in another community, they might not have any. We have a large Muslim community here. So books, even in the children's section on Ramadan and books on cooking and traditions within the Muslim community are very important for us to have. We have an active historical society and an active garden club. So we're going to buy the kinds of materials that the people in the community will want, even if they have those very special interests. One more thing, and this is where oftentimes your request to get your book in the library will just fall down. And it's such a hidden thing that nobody will even tell you. We order books only from distributors. There are 2 big distributors, Baker and Taylor and Ingram Content Group. When we order from them, we already have an account. We already have everything set up. We know exactly what we're going to get and how long it's going to take. It will be pre-processed and put on the shelf. So we will try very hard only to order things that can be acquired from Baker and Taylor and Ingram Group. I'll show you how to work around that in a little while. So now how do you get your book onto those shelves in the library? Right now, it might be sounding like a daunting task, all these reviews and distributors and everything, but there are ways. First of all, every department has many different librarians. The person that's sitting at the front desk stamping the book for you is probably not the librarian you want to talk to. Sometimes those people are on the desk only in the morning between 8 and 10, or they're only there on weekends, or they're only there on Thursday nights. There's a variety of librarians doing a number of different things. They're always constantly thinking about the local patrons and how to serve them. Relatively few of them have the power to purchase books. So to go in and hand your self-published book to the nice lady who's checking out your book will not do any good whatsoever. In fact, if you went to the reference librarian, the chances of getting to the right person are pretty slim. So it's a who you know and who is going to make the final decision. We always have to keep in mind that we are doing collection development, particularly in the public library, but in every library, we need to look at the collection as a whole. So first of all, that's going to mean long lead times. We said the spring and fall catalogs and the reviews of publications come out way ahead. So if you've got an idea that you'd like to get your book into the library, there almost isn't anything as too early to get started working towards that. The next thing we have is community interest. If John Grisham's books have always gone well in the library, we're going to buy the next one, even if it doesn't get a very good review, because people will want it, and we know from past use. Then we have to think about the taxpayer dollar. You probably have seen a few things about book requests to review books. Sometimes it gets splashed under the word book banning, and frequently it doesn't go that far. Frequently, it's just a request to review whether a certain book belongs in the library because those taxpayer dollars belong to those taxpayers. And sometimes they want to make sure they get their money's worth. There's also local events and local history. If you're coming up to a special date, you want to be able to meet the need within the community. So you look at the community. Last of all, we need to look at the whole collection, everything that is coming into the library at one time. The funds that we have are divided between the adult and the children, the teens. Within that, there's fiction and reference or nonfiction. There's picture books, there's media, magazines, 10 different Dewey subject areas, from religion and computers to social sciences to science to biographies and reading levels. So by the time you take the large amount of money that it looks like the library gets for a budget and divide that into sections, sometimes the pot isn't as big as we'd like it to be. So here's how to get around that review thing. If you have to have a book review for your book, you can get one. Normally, what Kirkus and LJ and the ALA book list look at is they will simply look at the books that are coming out and choose the ones they would like to review. Kirkus will always give you a positive review. If Kirkus picks your book, it will always be a positive review. That's why Kirkus is such the big name in reviews, because anything that's listed in there, you might as well order it right now in the library world. It is possible to pay Kirkus to write a review, but there's two tricky things. First of all, it has to be 15 weeks before your book is even published. So you may not even have a hard copy. You may have to send just a PDF of the insides of the pages for them to look at that point. 15 weeks before publication, they want to put out their review. The other thing about a paid review for Kirkus is they do not only write good reviews for a paid review. You will get an honest review. So their default on books in general is if they don't like the book, they simply don't write a review about it. If you pay for a review, they'll be glad to write the review, but they're going to be honest about it. So it's a risk you take when you pay for a Kirkus review. School Library Journal, and remember that's going to be mostly based on curriculum, they also will review submissions. And if you go to the School Library Journal website, there's a review submissions, and you can send things in and pay for a review. The same with Library Journal. They have, as we mentioned before, an indie author project where once a year they will do independent or self-published books, and it's a chance that you might get into that and then have a review to show the librarians. The USA review of books is not necessarily for the library world, but they are a little more open in who they take to review and what books they review. So if you get a good review from them and you can't get one from anyone else, you might at least point that out to the librarian and see if they will take a look at that review. But this is how you get around the reviewing issue. You can pay for a review. You can also get listed in something other than the journals we normally go to initially. For example, if you have something that's gotten into a science journal or child psychology, the American Historical Review, if your book is very specialized like that and it's been reviewed in a professional journal, that's something to highlight to the librarian. She may be very interested in having something that's well reviewed, but simply didn't make it in the general market reviewers that we have. The other thing to watch is what things are happening in the community. In Glen Ellen, we are going to have a speaking at the high school talking about adults connecting with young people. That will attract a great many people in the community. If you have a book about relationships between teenagers and adults, and it has not been sold to the library yet, knowing that you have that possibility means that your book may be able to be sold if they can connect it to that particular speech, and it might increase interest in your having your title. Once again, we can't wait until that speaker is there to make that point. Everything has to be done in advance. And then there are requests. We looked at the request form earlier, and it had a bunch of places to fill out. You can request, of course, but if you know a member of the board of the library or a member of the staff or a community expert, having those people request your book as well will make a big difference to the librarian in how hard they try to get hold of it. The community expert could be someone in your field, such as the person who runs the one wing of the botanic garden, or you might find a local church clergy who's willing to endorse a book on religion. They, the expert giving an endorsement or giving a request will carry more weight than just you doing it as the author. However, you can request your book, and you should. You want to make the ordering as easy as possible. So rather than just showing up with your book and saying, "Wouldn't you like to buy it from me right now?" Because they won't do that. You make a formal request, you include the ISBN, include the ordering source. And remember, that was Baker and Taylor or Ingram, or at least tell them exactly where it could be purchased, and the publisher. Very seldom do libraries buy from Amazon. We don't get a good discount rate. We don't get a good deal. They do not come prepackaged. So to say that your book is on Amazon and they could order it there is probably not going to be helpful for the librarian. When you do that, remember down at the bottom, we were going to write in that, tell us everything you know about the book. Well, find that special connection to the community or local events. If you've written an important book on the crossing of the Delaware and you know the anniversary of it is coming up, or you know that the curriculum will be studying the high school class will be studying that part of history, or the junior high, you'll have a much better chance of getting your book in the library because it's connected to your community and local events. Also, look at the books in the collection already there. How does it alike or different from what they have? Is it newer? Have you found some new material? Do they have 27 dinosaur books in the children's department already, but none of them cover the dinosaur that you're mentioning? What is the piece in your book that will expand the library and make it even more useful? Those are ways within your request to get around some of those limitations. And then there are programs. Once again, we plan seasonally. We spend early August looking at fall programs. In November, we're planning winter. And in March, we plan summer. So coming up with a Halloween book the week before Halloween and saying you've got a program will not be anything that the librarians are interested in having. They've been thinking about Halloween since last April. So be sure to do it in advance. They are also interested, once again, in the community-centered activities. Local interests. Every year in Glen Ellen, we have a 4th of July parade. So if you've written a children's book about 4th of July parades, you might well get it in even if it doesn't have a particular review. If there's an anniversary of some kind, your community's coming up to its 100th or 150th, that's a good thing to tie in too. Most of all, programs must be free to the public. That doesn't mean that you can't get paid for doing a program, but that program will be paid for out of the library budget, not because they charge admission to the program. They are community-centered, and that means accessibility for all. Libraries publish newsletters quarterly or monthly or semi-annually. They get them in there. If you can convince one of the book clubs in your community to read your book or to include it on the bibliography if they're reading a book similar to it, you can walk into the library with confidence because libraries love book clubs and they will be happy to buy multiple copies if they're sure they're going to be used by a book club. So find out from the library newsletter what groups meet and when they meet and who the contact person is and see what the topics are coming up. You want to highlight your community standing in a subject of expertise. If you've written a book on gardening and belong to the gardening club, they're going to want to put your book in the library because people are going to ask for it. You can offer to read your story at story time if there's already a theme for it. We talked about Halloween earlier, how you have to be much earlier than you think. Many libraries post-COVID and during this very cautious era when we are very protective of our children are resisting having guest people come in and read to the children live. Sometimes they will ask you to be vetted first, to pass certain security clearances, or to even have a tuberculosis test, just to make sure everyone they let in with the kids is going to be safe for the kids that gather there. So even if they reject you, they may be willing to read your book. You can offer a program where you review a type of literature, just one that your book happens to fit in. So if you've written a romance novel, you could volunteer to look at romance novels set in Scotland in the 1700s. And by the way, you just happen to have a book that fits that category. You'll review all the books and mention yours as well. And then what meetings are already meeting at the library that you can help out with? We mentioned the stamp collectors, the philatelic group earlier. If they meet regularly at the library on Monday nights, that's a group you want to piggyback on. Ask them if they're interested in seeing one of your books and if they'll request that the library buy it. Look at the library newsletter. Now, we've talked mostly about public libraries because they're frankly the easiest to get into. They are most open, they have the widest variety of interests, they have the widest variety of users. But there are other libraries. They tend to be more restrictive. So schools, as we said, were always focused on the curriculum for the schools. In grade school, it not only has to be strictly on the curriculum, but you almost have to have a tie into a particular unit. But if you find out that your local grade school does a unit on the Arctic every winter, and you have a book on the Arctic, that's a great way to get into the library. The grade schools are going to be looking for it. With a high school, you need to be a little more of an expert in science or math or literature, but a virtual visit can sometimes be arranged to a high school where you will get to be a guest speaker even for 15 minutes or so and talk about the particular interest you had that encouraged you to write this book. In a community college, you'll need to get a connection with the professor, not the librarian. But once you're on the syllabus, or once you go as a guest speaker, your book will be of more interest to the community college library. So whenever you look at libraries in school settings, remember curriculum first. Somewhat less restrictive, but usually looking for donations, are the church libraries. If there's a church or religious school, they're going to want things that are strictly within their denominational lines, strictly within their areas of interest, usually seasonal. So they'll be looking for Easter books for Easter time and Christmas books or Ramadan books for a better time during that year. If you have a special interest library, for example, the zoo, the museum, um, you needs to be an expert in the area that you're writing in order to get their attention. But they are somewhat less restrictive than the school libraries and worth pursuing. So you have this book in hand and it may or may not get into the library, but it's not going to be the last book you write. So before you write your next book, think how the library can help you get ahead of all this game. Remember, librarians are very fun people. When you write your next book, go to the library first. So before you start writing, research your topic of interest with them. They will not just lead you to Wikipedia and a Google search. They will give you the kind of credible materials you need to study and research your materials. Ask them what kinds of books are being requested. Are a lot of people in this town looking for books on stamp collecting? Has something else caught the community interest? Also, look at the collection and community needs. If your library is large, you will be looking at places that other people will have large library connections. If it's a small library, then it probably will have a much smaller connection. And then before submitting, go back to the library and look at the other books like yours. Note the publishers who distribute to the library collections. Who's been publishing books in your area? See where the topics have empty shelves. Your book might need to go in there. Check the library newsletter for those perennial topics. And before you submit to the agent or to the publisher, in your query proposal, mention that you have studied the library market. If you can tell them that you know how to get your book into the library, that's a big selling point. You can use any data collected from the library research in the promo materials. Before you pick a publisher, ask about their catalogs. Ask if they distribute through Baker and Taylor and Ingram. And what is their review policy? You can also publish with a distribution company. Both Baker and Taylor and Ingram have self-publishing wings. So if you want to retain creative rights on your book, you can publish through BookBaby and Ingram Spark. That means when you go to the library, you'll be able to say, it is available through Baker and Taylor. You can order this book easily. Remember, librarians are very fun people. We want to be part of your journey into being an author and into being an author who's in the library. Thanks so much for your time. I hope we have a little time for questions afterwards.